Public Citizen has a new report out. It's called Forgetting the Forgotten, and it's a list of 101 ways in which Donald Trump has handed our government over to giant corporations and Republican mega donors instead of doing things that would benefit, average working citizens and, people, you, me, everybody else. And this, I think this is one of the most underreported stories of our era, is how the whole Republican machine, how the so-called conservative movement, and how the Trump administration have all become shills for billionaires and big corporations, period, full stop. I mean, there used to be actual principles associated with the Republican Party. My father was a Republican. He would describe it to me like this. He would say, as a conservative, I believe in positive change. I believe in moving society forward, but you need to do it in a careful, thoughtful, incremental way, because if you flip society too fast, if you make things happen that are imprudent, you end up with the Soviet Union, or you end up with a Great Depression, or you end up with a civil war, or you end up with all kinds of problems. And so you do things carefully and slowly. That's what conservative meant in the 1950s. Now, there was a whole bunch of subsets underneath that. There were people who used those as rationales to say, well, then we can't move too fast on civil rights, or we can't move too fast on this, that, or the other thing. But, the simple reality is that that kind of thinking is just gone. And now we're back to this 101 ways, as I was telling you, the Public Citizen has come up with, forgetting the forgotten, 101 ways in which we're basically, being screwed by the Republicans. On the line with us is Robert Weissman, the president of Public Citizen. Citizen.org is the website. Robert, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Tom. Great to be with you.
Great having you with us. So tell us about this Plutocrats over people study.
Well, in a way, it's sort of trying to capture the entirety, or at least a big chunk of the entirety of the Trump administration in a small little document. As you were saying, the president ran his campaign as a populist, and to understand why he won, I think we have to recognize that he, in his own twisted way, was speaking to people's legitimate grievances. That was a big part of what got him elected. As president, of course, he's governed as the most extremist corporatist the country has ever seen. And so our report aims to document that, from looking at things that are very high profile, like the tax cut that will confer more than $1 trillion on the super rich and the corporate class, to rollbacks of specific labor rules, undoing of particular environmental protections, and on and on and on, 101 on and ons.
Yeah, well, and all the more the tragedy. What were the things specifically that you were thinking of when you said that he campaigned on real grievances? And to what extent have those either A, not been addressed by the Republican Party or the Trump administration, or B, even, it turns out in retrospect, they were just plain old flat-out lies?
Well, I would say that zero of the legitimate grievances have been addressed, and a lot of them, worse, he's done the exact opposite. So,
for example,
he didn't really offer much by way of reform, but he did identify the grievances. The people needed jobs. They felt that their wages weren't adequate. And then especially what I think he captured was the idea that Washington is an insider's game. And the message was he was going to come, he was going to blow up the inside deal making, that's what drain the swamp meant, and make Washington serve, as he said, the forgotten man and woman. And it's been exactly the opposite. So if you start with that core idea of getting rid of the insiders, in fact, what he has done is turn over the government to corporate insiders. He has a cabinet of, the billionaire cabinet made up of the super rich. But if you look at the people who really drive policy, the second and third tier people, the assistant secretaries and the deputy secretaries, we found about 70% of them came directly from corporate America, from corporate affiliated think tanks. And in instance after instance, you actually have people who came from an industry about to oversee the industry that they used to work for. The most egregious example of that is now with the nomination for Secretary of Health and Human Services, Alex Azar, who was formerly an executive at Eli Lilly, the big pharma company, is unimaginable in any prior administration, even in the Bush and Reagan administrations, that we would have had a drug company executive as the nation's top health official, but that's what we're on the verge of getting. And if you sort of move away from just the idea of the inside deal making, without forgetting, of course, how Trump is making deals for himself, and you look at the policies, the people he said he was going to help, if you sort of think about the sort of prototypical lower middle class white voter, they are getting pounded by the policies that Trump is pursuing, from the tax policy or protecting big banks, making it so that consumers can't join together, to sue banks for rip-offs, to rolling back the overtime rule, which would ensure some fair payment to low-level managers, or now proposing to enable theft of tips, which would, of course, take money right out of the pockets of many of the people who voted for him. Even to things like undoing energy efficiency standards, which at the end of the day really help American consumers. And Trump and Scott Pruitt at EPA and Rick Perry at the Energy Department are conspiring to just pour gifts on the dirty energy industries and affiliated oil manufacturing at the expense of consumers and a green future.
Yeah, and Rick Perry with, Bob Massey showing up for that meeting with his action plan that they took in the photograph, and turns out that Trump has done most of the things now that Massey was promoting.
Yeah, and if you had, Perry proposed about a $3 billion annual subsidy be given to nuclear and coal companies on the just completely fabricated rationale that those were more dependable sources of energy. So therefore, all other sources of energy, which really actually means all consumers, should have to subsidize the coal and nuclear industry. And Perry wasn't that effort failed. He had to sort of run that by an independent agency, and even the Republicans on the agency said that's just completely crazy. But Perry was game to do it.
Yeah, but almost never do we hear a discussion of this in the media. For example, this morning, while we were doing show prep for about 2 hours, I had the TV on I think it was MSNBC. Well, we were on CNN for a little while too. Just listening to how the coverage was, and everything was about, can you trust this man? Do you like this man? Do you hate this man? Who's going to have more power? Who's not going to have more power? And I kept yelling at the TV, what are the issues? What are the issues these guys are willing to shut the government down over? What are the issues that they're willing to give up on in order to unshut the government down? And there's like no discussion of these things. We don't discuss, and similarly, we don't discuss the actual crimes is the wrong word, but crimes against democracy maybe that Trump is engaging in.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think his outrageousness makes it hard to turn away.
Yeah.
And it's obviously good TV, and some of that stuff, as you know and talk about it, it's really important, right? If he goes around and is spewing racist stuff, the media has to cover that, and they should be criticizing that. But they're ignoring the policies that are actually more meaningful than what he said, even on that dimension of racism. You look at the actual budget that his administration wants to put forward, not the spending bill we're going to get, but the budget they proposed. They wanted to eliminate funding for low-income home heating. They wanted to eliminate legal services for the poor.
Yeah, it's crazy. We're hitting a break.